Well, there's a lot of research that shows that exercise helps actually generate new brain cells, neurogenesis.
Just for the brain health, mental health, reading or working out?
Was competing a year or two earlier as a male athlete and then is now on the women's team. That doesn't feel like a level playing field. I thought the guy was going to kill me. I thought he was going to, he like jumps up. He's a 6'5".
There's a competition. You gotta win the competition. You gotta be the best man for that woman.
I still shot it. It was a great experience. I got to shoot with Will Smith. He was in the room, and
he's crazy. He's wild.
Yeah, he is. He jumped over the railing and stabbed her in the back, and she missed 2 years. And she came back, but was never the same level that she had been.
Don't stay home and try not to be an asshole.
Yeah, that's good way to put it. And she sent him a death threat. Like, if you keep trying to protect Professor Jensen, I'm going to kill you. So I've had interesting experiences like that.
Okay, so let me properly introduce you. The most handsome human being on this podcast. So, Jake is a professor of sport and performance psychology at California State University, Northridge. He earned his PhD in sports psychology from the University of Tennessee. Jake also works with clients, including athletes, actors, dancers, and others, on optimizing mental performance through mental training and mindfulness. Jake loves to travel, lived in Europe for 2 years, and speaks fluent French. Jake was an NCAA Division I tennis player at Utah State and continues to play tennis 3 to 4 times a week. He also is a talented pianist and has composed a musical score for a film script, and he is currently writing. Jake, I want to touch a few topics today. So let's start with the sports psychology, right? So what does a sports psychology actually do? What do you do? You're like a shrink, or just with the athletes, or does it differ?
Yeah, so I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not a licensed psychologist. So I don't deal with mental health. I deal with mental training. So how to help athletes handle pressure situations, how to focus in the moment, concentrate, move on from a mistake. If you miss that 3-point shot, not dwelling on that and moving on to the next shot. So it's really all, I'm not a shrink. And I think that's important because athletes often get very hesitant. Like, they don't want to be like going to the shrink or there's something wrong with them. I really think mental training can benefit any athlete, no matter how, some are obviously mentally stronger and tougher than others, but I think everybody can benefit from doing more consistent mental training. So we do imagery, visualization, goal setting, relaxation techniques, meditation, just a huge range of anything that's going to help be more mentally present and tough and moving on from mistakes.
Can you also be a little bit closer to the mic?
Yes, sorry. Yep.
So by saying you're not a shrink, so you can't prescribe OxyContin and other opioids, right?
Yeah, I can't prescribe medication. And then if there's more serious, like clinical depression, eating disorders, I refer to a clinical psychologist or a counselor that we have at the university, or if I have private clients, there's outside network.
So you're a PhD and shrinks are MDs, right?
Well, there's clinical psychologists, which is a PsyD. And in California, a lot of times PsyDs can prescribe medication. Psychiatrists are an MD degree, and then mine's a PhD, so it can get kind of confusing. And a lot of people don't understand the differences. But so a lot of times I have to explain that I'm not here to treat, again, mental illness. I'm really focused on performance.
Okay, so what kind of problems do people or athletes have?
I laugh because it's all over the place. Because it's one thing to say, I'm separating what's going on in their life with what's going on in their sport, but you can't really separate them. So if an athlete's having a major relationship issue, that's usually going to then impact how they're performing. Yeah. Or if they're not doing well in school, that's going to impact how they're doing on the athletic field. So it's a huge range. It can be anything from they're not getting along with their coach, they're not performing the way they want to, they've had an injury and they're having a hard time coming back. That's a common one that I face. There's athletes that have been, physically injured, but then trying to mentally come back. But like I said, it's all over the place in terms of why they come to me.
Okay, and men and women, do their problems differ or just the same problems?
I think I have to be careful. I don't want to get myself in trouble here. I think the female athletes tend to share more with me, which is interesting. So I feel like sometimes they tend to be more emotional for the most part. I feel like with the female athletes, there's often more drama and things going on with teammates and coaches, whereas the men, maybe that's going on, but they kind of hold that in.
Yeah.
I find that the male athletes wait longer to come and see me in terms of like waiting till they're really like in a total, like they're
mess.
choking all the time. They're a mess there. Whereas the female athletes seek out the counseling a little bit earlier. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest differences.
So you as a sports psychologist, are you being present when they work out, when they practice, or you just have just another separate room when they go after some practices or before that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that's one of the nice things about not being a shrink or a clinical psychologist is that the boundaries are less defined. So I often will be there at practice. Especially with certain teams I work with, I always go to like one practice a week just so they feel comfortable with me being around. And I do usually like a team session every week with certain teams. And then I have individual athletes that come. I have an office that they come to, but often they feel more comfortable at meeting me out on the practice court or the field before they feel comfortable coming to my office.
So you prefer working with teams or with individuals?
I prefer working with individuals, but I have 300 athletes that I am responsible for at Cal State Northridge. So there's no way I can meet with 300 athletes on a regular basis. Yeah. So the only way to really reach more athletes is to do team sessions.
And how does your work differ from, for instance, coaches? Because a coach can be a motivator, kind of a psychologist as well.
Well, I always say the coaches are the best mental trainers that you can have if they understand, that aspect of it. And some coaches do a lot of that, and I want them to be involved because I can't be there every day. The coaches are there every day. So I actually want them I work with them to try to think about some of the mental training techniques that they can implement into practice on a daily basis. And it's very obvious the teams that have had quite a bit of exposure to it from their coaches versus those that really haven't.
What do you mean?
Well, like, for example, I worked with one team last fall that I wanted them to do a guided imagery, imagining themselves performing the way they wanted to perform. And I asked them to close their eyes, and like no one closed their eyes. They like looked around at each other like,
just because that's odd?
Because that to them, that's not something that they've ever done. So it was very like, what is he asking me to do? Whereas other teams are
let me guess, like these were men.
No, it's actually a women's team.
Oh, really?
But I think it's a sport that maybe just doesn't have a lot of history or exposure to sports psych. I have to be a little careful mentioning the name of the team just for confidentiality reasons. Yeah. But whereas other sports like tennis and golf and stuff that have had a lot more, I think even at the professional level, have a lot more experience with seeing sports psychologists working with the athletes that they buy into it faster.
Can you share some one or two techniques that you usually implement with working with teams, I want to say?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned imagery or visualization. That's something that I'll do both with individual and team athletes, and that can range from choosing a specific skill and seeing yourself doing it successfully. So a basketball player that's not shooting free throws well, I'll have them visualize or imagine, shoot 10 free throws perfectly in your head. And if you start missing, then we work on techniques to stop that and reset. It's a way to get some mental reps in that you don't have to be out there actually on the, out there on the court.
And that works.
Yes, yeah, because they often can control it more in their mind than they can physically. But if you can get that controlled in your mind, then I'm working with one athlete right now who has what's called the Yips, which she can't throw the ball. Like she literally it's like there's almost a paralysis when she goes to throw the ball. And so if I have her out of practice, like she cannot throw the ball. But in her mind now, we've been working for a couple months, she can now see herself throwing successfully. And it's starting slowly to transfer to the actual going out there on the softball field and throwing the ball.
And she can't throw the ball because of the physical disability? It's just the mental stuff.
You know what? The yips are a combination, I think, of neurology and psychology. So, and it's physical and mental.
But physically, she's
it's
able
like
to do that.
It's a skill that she's had for the majority of her life, but she like literally goes to throw the ball and it's like
paralysis.
It's a paralysis. I got it actually in my serve in tennis when I was a collegiate athlete. That's why I went into sports psychology, because I literally would go to serve the ball and I couldn't serve it over the net. It would either go to the bottom of the net or over the fence. And that's a skill that I had done since I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it's not very common, but when it happens to an athlete, it's the
How is it called?
It's called the yips.
Yips.
Yeah, Y-I-P-S. I don't know why it's named
that. Happens after some kind of an accident, some kind of a trauma?
I think it's very misunderstood what causes it. I think for me, it wasn't an injury or an accident, but I think I put so much pressure on myself to do well my senior year that I had one or two bad matches where I served really badly, and then I overthought it. I had coaches like overanalyzing it. I got so in my head that it just snowballed to the point where by the end of the season, I literally couldn't play anymore because I couldn't get the serve over the net.
Can you apply the same technique with, for example, with kids?
Yeah, in terms of with the imagery. Or,
yeah.
Yeah, I think the great thing about the mental training is that it can apply to all ages. And I wish we could get more of that into youth sport. I mean, the problem is there's just not money, and I can volunteer a certain amount of time to work with younger athletes, but there's just not a budget for that in our school system or in youth sports at the lower levels. Obviously, at the elite training levels, there might be, but
can you do this technique if you haven't ever did that? For instance, if you haven't ever done that, for instance, if she has before done that, the throwing the ball,
yeah.
So she kind of knows what it feels like. But for instance, if I'm gonna tell my son, just imagine how you swim, but he has never swum before.
Yeah,
can you do that?
Well, I mean, I think for imagery related to sport to be most effective, you need to have a certain skill level to do it. But if your son's learning to throw, he could use that to help learn faster. So it would be very I can't imagine doing a backflip on a balance beam because I've never done it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can kind of imagine it, but I don't really have the feel for that. So it's helpful if your child's learning a skill, that would be just a way to reinforce it, the reps, without actually having to go out and throw the ball.
That's some kind of a new level to. So there is boxing, practice boxing, then there is shadow boxing, right?
Yeah.
And then there is your imagining how you box.
Yeah. And a lot of times the imagery will involve some physical, like the shadow boxing. You see a lot of Olympic skiers, and at the top of the run, they're visualizing or imagining the whole race, and they're actually moving their arms with the poles and things. Every Olympics they'll show an athlete doing that. A lot of times I don't have the athletes actually do the physical movements. It's all in the mind, but sometimes involuntarily, if I'm imagining myself hitting a forehand in tennis, sometimes it just happens because just by imagining it, it's activating my neuromuscular system, so that I'll actually do it without even trying, like the swing. I did that on an airplane once, and I actually hit the woman in the middle seat. I was imagining playing tennis because I used flying time to do that, and I actually hit her. And it was.
It's good you're not a boxer.
Yeah, it was not good though, because she got all upset and called the flight attendant over, and I was trying to explain that I wasn't trying to hit her. I was just imagining. So that was my one bad time doing it on an airplane. But
have you seen this TV show Queen's Gambit?
I know of the show. I have not seen
Chess
it.
player, right?
Yes.
So that's like the same thing when you can implement this in your life as well. So if you play chess, for instance, for a few hours a day, few days in a row, then you close your eyes on your sleep and you just see the chessboard.
Yeah.
That's like kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Imagining this type of thing.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. So also, that is what is written about you is recognizing the diverse needs of individuals in sports and entertainment. Jensen offers personalized mentorship programs tailored to each client's unique journey, whether it's overcoming performance anxiety, managing stress, or owning leadership skills. What is performance anxiety?
Well, since I've moved to LA, I don't only work with athletes. I've worked with firefighters that are trying to make it through the fire academy.
Wow.
And they get so stressed about making the physical skills. They have to do certain tests that they have to pass to. And so I had one firefighter that had failed like 2 times, and he had one more chance. And this is his career, goal. And he physically could do all of the physical tests. But when it actually came down to it, he would get so anxious and stressed that he would almost go into a panic state and not be able to complete it. And it wasn't because he wasn't fit enough or that he hadn't practiced.
And it's a grown man, not
30-year-old man. No, maybe 25 to 30-year-old that age. And so we worked for a few months on overcoming some of that anxiety so that he finally, the 3rd time, was able to pass, which I was very happy about. But to me, that's not sport, but that's what I would call performance anxiety, not being able to perform when it counts. He could go run the 10-mile run in the time if it didn't matter, but when it actually mattered. And sometimes, I'm working with water polo players that have to make a certain time trial for the swimming, and they can do it on their own, but they can't do it when it's being timed. So that's a lot of similarities. Or an actor that knows their lines, gets up in front of the casting director and freezes up and can't. That would be an example of performance anxiety. So I've really expanded my practice to be sport and performance psychology, just to include that it's not just athletes.
Yeah.
It could apply to a teacher that gets up in front of the room and freezes up somebody giving a speech in front of a group and they can't give a speech because they get so anxious or nervous. So I feel like it can really apply to almost any. It would be like you doing your podcast and being nervous and not being able to speak or to be confident and think clearly in the questions you're asking. So it really can apply, I think, to almost any profession.
Is there usually some kind of a problem, childhood trauma, something like this? That's why they can't perform or they can't sing or dance or...
I think it can be, but I think it also can stem from just you have 1 or 2 bad experiences and then it snowballs, or something else is going on in your life and you're distracted. So it certainly can happen from childhood issues and trauma and things. But I think it also can arise, like with me with the Yips in college, I didn't really have any trauma from I had a very stable upbringing, good coaches, good parents. But I think I put so much pressure on myself as a perfectionist. I do find a lot of high-level performers are also perfectionists, which is good in some ways, but it can also lead to a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
That can then, it's amazing. Stress and anxiety does not help us perform at our very best. For the most part. I mean, we're learning how to channel it.
I can only imagine if you train for your whole life right from the childhood since you're 5, 6 years old, and then the day comes you're at the Olympics and you have to do sprint.
Yeah.
100-meter sprint, it's like 9 seconds. You win, you lose, you're done. Your career is over. I can only imagine what kind of anxiety do they feel, those athletes.
Well, and then in a lot of those sports, the Olympics is the ultimate getting to the Olympics or winning a medal. And then if you fail in that moment, and I hate to use the word fail, but you don't perform the way you don't win, you don't perform the way you want to. Yeah, there's world championships and national championships stuff, but still the Olympics is like the ultimate. That's 4 years away. And it's very hard to reset, I think, going, okay, how can I stay motivated for 4 more years to get that 9-second chance again?
And you're not sure you're gonna get to the Olympics in 4 years.
Yeah, because there's a whole new crop of athletes coming up. Certain sports, the time frame of being at your best is pretty narrow in terms of age. So, yeah, I mean, I'm lucky. I played a sport that, you can make mistakes and still come back and win. Tennis, you can play a horrible set of tennis and still win the match. There's opportunities to work your way. Sports, a lot of sports don't have that luxury.
That's like, I want to say, Federer used to do, right? He was playing not that good, but 7-5, 7-5, 7-5.
Yeah.
How did, or 6-4, 6-4. How did you do that? He was 0-4, for instance, 0-5, and then he always get the W. What about SATs? Can you prepare a student for an SAT?
Yeah, I mean, SATs, I haven't specifically worked with people on that, but certainly I have athletes or people that I've worked with that have a lot of test anxiety. So it's the same thing, they do well in school, or they are certainly smart enough, but it just with that pressure of a test, sorry, I keep hitting the mic. I hope
we're good.
With that pressure of performing in the moment with a timed limit and things, they panic. And so definitely working on ways to manage that and relax and keep the mind clear.
The same with the job interviews?
Yes.
Share some techniques. So maybe someone is watching and he's like having a job interview in 2 to 3 weeks.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but just starting with working on your breath. Because when we get nervous, our breath goes way up into our chest and becomes short and shallow, and there's no way to really feel calm and grounded if your breath is up here. So bringing it down into the diaphragm, bringing it down, moving through the whole body sounds so simple, but it can be very powerful. So we start with breath, and then that kind of sets the foundation for being able to relax in other ways. And I always say it's not usually something that you can just turn on and off overnight, but we practice different techniques. Like a progressive muscle relaxation is a technique where you actually purposely tense all of your muscles from your feet up through your head and then release the tension. And if you practice that outside of the performance setting, then you feel like you have more control. So if suddenly I'm feeling tense in my shoulders, I don't have to tense my whole body, but I feel the tension there, I can just release it. So these skills help athletes or performers feel like they have more control over what's happening in either their body or their mind. There's another technique called autogenic training where you actually tell your body to feel warm and loose and relaxed. And then if you practice that for a few months, like all I have to say to myself when I serve now in tennis is warm and loose, and my arm immediately, like arm, wrist, everything gets very relaxed and I'm able to serve. And then meditation, I do a lot of meditation. That helps me calm my mind. So again, it's not a quick fix. These are techniques and stuff that you can practice outside of your performance setting that then will translate to when you have to perform in the moment.
So in regards to breathing, for instance, if you do the cold plunge, the first thing that you have to do is control your breathing, right?
Yes.
Because if you won't, you're going to get nervous, you're going to get anxiety, you're going to get out of
and you're not going to last in there very long. Yeah.
And do you have to realize that it's not dangerous for your body, so you're not in a survival mode?
I think that's why the more, there's a whole like exposure therapy, but the more that you're around something, then realizing it's not going to harm you and being okay with that. We all have, like I have an irrational fear of cold. So cold plunges are incredibly hard for me because I grew up in a cold place and I hated being cold. I know you. So for me, the idea of purposely like putting myself in that is whereas like a sauna or heat, I'm okay because that's what like I like. I like to be hot, which is why I live in California. So I don't have to be cold very much. But, so yes, the more you can be around, and I think seeing other, hey, my teammates going in the cold plunge, if they can do it, I can do it. That kind of thing too. we call it vicarious experience, but if you see others doing it, then it's like, okay, they can do that, then I can do it.
Yeah, that's the same thing for me, because in Lithuania it's very harsh. For instance, so I looked up, so -30 in Celsius, it's -20 in Fahrenheit.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's
that's very
freezing
cold,
cold. Yeah. So for me, cold is very dangerous. You can get cold, you can get pneumonia, something like
Yeah,
that with
yeah.
your lungs. You're gonna freaking die. That's it. So that's why not cold plunge. I'm not into it now. I'm thinking of it. Yes, maybe I should. I have done a few times the cold shower, but it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, mentally. Like,
Yeah.
just to stand there for 30 seconds to 60 seconds, that's a challenge.
Yeah. We actually make all of the athletes at our university do a cold plunge at least once a week. And we have a big, huge, like almost pool size
Yeah.
for them to go in. But
Health benefits are enormous.
are huge.
Share some techniques. How do people can start doing, for instance, cold shower?
Well, I think, again, the more you do it, the more you get used to, even though it's painful for some, they know that what to expect.
No way around. You just start.
Yeah, but when I do it, I imagine myself in like the Sahara Desert burning up, and then I'm like, I actually get myself in my mind like in this like almost to the point of being in pain, being hot,
Really?
and then it makes the cold, for me, it makes it less like of a shock.
And you physically
I can
feel
actually
that?
physically, I start sweating. I can, just by imagining it, I get my, ideally I like to be like in a sauna before, or really hot, hot tub type of thing. But sometimes like at our university where we have the cold plunge, there's no, there's no sauna so I just mentally get myself in that, like I'm burning up hot, and then that makes it better. So
That's
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like cold plunges though. They're not my.
But it's so good.
It is. It's great.
So the first time I heard about sports psychologist, I want to say a few years ago. So my mom is a Ukrainian, and I'm a big fan of boxing, of martial arts, UFC especially. So there's a world heavyweight champion, Alexander Usyk. He's Ukrainian, and I was watching his interview, and he said, so he's 29-0, I want to say, undefeated, right? And he said he has a sports psychologist, and I was like, wow, this guy, he's a world champion, and he hasn't ever lost a fight, and he still works with a sports psychologist. Then I realized that's a whole industry. A lot of people use that. And for instance, let's take Naomi Osaka, right? I want to say a few years ago, she was the #1 ranked tennis player in the world. Then something happened, and she's now in 2 years. I want to say did 1 or 2 performances.
Yeah.
She's now number 749, and she admitted that the problem was mental health, not physical health, not physical problems, traumas, and something like that, but mental health issue.
Yeah.
The #1, and now 749.
Yeah. Yeah, and I obviously the tennis example I know better because that's my sport that I follow. But it's interesting because I think her basic personality was pretty shy and reserved, and then when she got to #1, she was thrown into the
Spotlight.
All the endorsements, all the public appearances, all the media attention, and she just couldn't handle it without. And it's amazing to see, she went from, again, like you said, #1 in the world to, she's just coming back now she ended up having a child about 6 months ago. But I know she's worked a lot with, I think, therapists, but also some sports psych to be able to handle that and manage it, because it's, different athletes, different personalities handle that so differently, where some embrace it and love that attention. Others, it just because, it sounds so great most of us would love to be in her situation, but I think we don't really know how a lot of times we'll handle something till we do.
I remember myself being, I want to say, 20 to 25 years old, and Bieber was just coming up star, right? And everyone was just bashing him. Oh, he's this and that. And I was like, you have no idea what does he experience every day. So he was 15, 14, 16 years old. He already got his millions. He already got his followers and everything. The whole world was watching at him. He's just a little kid.
Yeah.
So that's a surprise. He didn't end up doing drugs, hard drugs, and etc. And he's good. He's, I want to say, 30 now, 28, 29, something like this.
Yeah.
So that's surprising. So a lot of us are just thinking, oh, those athletes are just spoiled brats, right? They got their millions, they got the followers, they are on the top of the world. But if we could only imagine what it is like for one day to be in that position, that spot, just like Naomi Osaka was, I believe we would choose another path.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're so, I mean, we forget how young a lot of them are when they start having success and money, and that, you know, and there's no real training for that. Like,
you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
So I think absolutely just being more understanding of, they have a lot of money and endorsements and things, but it's also it adds a level of pressure and stress that we don't really know that what they're going through.
And especially right now with the social media. For instance, 30 years ago, Michael Jordan wasn't exposed to that kind of a publicity.
No, absolutely.
Like LeBron does right now.
Yeah.
So he was just about to play basketball. He had to be the number one in basketball. That's it. He got covered with all the contracts at Nike and etc. But now you don't have to be just a good player. You have to be a personality on social media, on Instagram, YouTube, maybe some other publications. That's a tough job.
It's a tough job. I think social media has contributed a lot to some of these mental health issues, just because people say the nastiest, worst things about celebrities and athletes and, people in the public. I just go, these are still human beings. Like, I read some comments sometimes and I'm just like, dang, that would. So it's a lot for these athletes, and I think a lot of them just don't read them because it's better to not read a lot of the comments. But it's hard to totally get away from it as well because it's just everywhere.
Have you ever had a client which had this kind of problems because of social media and the hate stuff?
Even at the collegiate level, all of the teams I work with have an Instagram page and a TikTok and some of the comments on those, I'm like,
kids are nasty.
We're not even one of the top universities in the country, but even at our level, there's still a lot of sometimes hurtful and hateful things being said on social media, and I just have to remind the athletes it's not a personal attack on you. People, that's how they feel empowered. You just need to block that out or not look at it. But it's not easy to do because it's out there all the time.
So suggestion number one is you just don't read it.
I think it depends on the person. I think for some they just have to not look at it, and then others, it's like so much a part of what they do that they can't not look at it. But then working on, that's not a reflection of who you really are, but it's not easy. I mean,
you see, Jake, I remember myself being in school, in high school. Man, kids are nasty. They talk that kind of smack every day and straight to the face. They don't filter any words.
No.
When you grow up, you're like, no, maybe I can say that. So, but when you're a kid, you're going all the way.
Yeah.
No problem with that.
Well, I think that's the thing is, in the past, as we get older and are adults, we tend to start filtering.
Yeah.
But on social media, I think that rule has not applied. So it gives people a free space where they don't filter and they feel like they can say anything. But some of the stuff that gets said is just, it's hard not to take that personally.
Especially if you don't have to be verified on social media. Right?
Exactly.
Like on YouTube, like whatever.
Yeah.
Name, last name, whatever picture you say stuff, that's it.
Yeah.
On Facebook, on Instagram, maybe you have to do another.
A little bit, but still there's not a lot of filtering going on.
So you stated that in California there are only 72 certified consultants, right? So that's not a lot.
No, we have a national certification now. It's Certified Mental Performance Consultant, CMPC. And it's growing, but there's still, I mean, you think about a state the size of California, you would think there'd be
sports is huge here.
Hundreds and hundreds of certified sports psychologists, and there's not. And some states have only 3 or 4. So our field is still really, there's a lot of room for growth and opportunities.
That's a good niche for someone who is an aspiring professional. He seeks for maybe some kind of a career in that area, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I first got my PhD in 2012, I got certified at that point, but a lot of jobs did not require
PhDs.
They didn't require PhDs, and they didn't require the certification. But now almost every job that I see posted in sports psych, they want you to have that CMPC. So it's really becoming more standard now, which is, I think, a good thing. Because before, like, a lot of people would just call themselves mental trainers or mental coaches or even sports psych consultants that didn't really have the credentials.
Yeah.
And that's one problem with our field is people were doing it without any. They might have a undergrad or master's degree, but they didn't really have training specifically in sport or with athletes. And I think there's more control over the quality of the training and certification.
And the PhD is what, 10 to 12 years?
No,
college?
it was 6 years for me.
6 years.
Yeah, which was long enough.
6 years.
10 to 12 would have been more than I could have done.
What's higher than that? Academia?
PhD is the high, but there's other licensures and things that I could have added on. So if I wanted to like treat mental health issues, I could add on a licensed professional counselor, for example, or something like that.
But PhD is the highest rank in your area.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's go for individual sports and team sports, right? So what is more complicated for a human being as an individual? To play, for instance, tennis, when it all depends on you and your opponent, or to be a team member, for instance, basketball, soccer?
Yeah. Well, for me, I chose tennis because I liked having all the pressure on myself and not feeling like I was letting anyone else down. So that, like, I think certain personalities gravitate towards individual sports. So for me, the team environment was way too much for me to handle. You know, my mom put me in team sports when I was young, baseball, basketball. I think I lasted in soccer for about a week, but baseball was the only team sport that I actually could play as a kid, because even though it's a team sport, it's very individual. When you're batting, it's just you. I played first base, it was just me in that position. I mean, I obviously had to rely on teammates to some degree, but it was much more of an individual feel to it than like basketball or soccer. So I find even now, you know, there's the athletes that gravitate more towards individual sports, they like that, and then there's other athletes that really need that team environment. But I do find in terms of working with athletes, those that are in team sports, we spend a lot more time on building how to build team cohesion and relationships among team members and trusting in each other and being cohesive and united and all, you know, because it's not just them. You know, you can have your best performance, but if the team's not working well together, the results are not going to be there. So it's different challenges, and I definitely see different personalities gravitating towards the different sports based, you know, on those that like being much more in their kind of on their own versus those that need that team. And
if you play for a team, and if you have a bad day, you don't let yourself down. You let down the whole team, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the pressure from the peers is quite high as well.
Very high. And I think even for me, like as a tennis player, in college, it is a team sport in the sense that your score contributes to the whole team. And I did not like that pressure, you know, with it like tied at 3-3 and it comes down to my match. Whoever, you know, wins 4 out of the 7 matches wins. That puts so much. I did not handle that. I was much better when it was just an individual tournament. My results mattered for me. They didn't matter for a team. But that's obviously for collegiate athletes, even individual sports, your score contributes to your team. So you still have to have certain level of, you know, understanding of managing that pressure of, hey, it's not just losing a match for me, it's losing a match for my team.
Let's take the old school basketball era, NBA in 80s to 90s, right? So Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, best of the best coaches, right, in the history of basketball. Did they have a specialist just like you?
Well, Phil Jackson is really looked at as one of the first high-profile coaches to bring in mental training to both when he worked for the Chicago Bulls as well as the Lakers. So he brought in a guy named George Mumford who did a ton of mental training and mindfulness and meditation with the Bulls and the Lakers. I don't know about some of the other coaches, but Phil Jackson definitely is a kind of a pioneer in that sense. And he made sure that his players bought into that and really were present and there for that. And I think that's where, he was such a high profile coach and high profile teams that became standard in the NBA for teams to have someone. So I did my master's degree at the University of Utah, where one of my professors there was the longtime sports psychologist for the Utah Jazz.
Amazing.
And so I think it's in certain sports like basketball, it's been pretty mainstream now for 30, 40, maybe not 40, 30 years.
30 years.
Whereas other sports, I feel like it's still kind of
catching up
in that sense.
Utah Jazz in 1990s were top team.
Yeah.
Malone, Hornacek, Stockton.
Yeah.
Man, that was the team.
Yeah.
I remember myself when I was, 10 years old, I was spending my summer at my grandma's townhouse. And at night, because the time difference, at night our one television was doing live shows of the NBA Finals. That was the first time I was exposed to NBA, and that was Chicago Bulls versus Utah Jazz.
Yeah, 2 years in a row they met in the NBA Finals, and
I hated the Bulls.
We're so close.
Utah Jazz was my team.
I know.
Malone.
Yeah. Well, in Utah, they were our only pro team at the time. So, like, the entire state, it was like a party for the whole, playoffs. It was huge. We almost got it.
You almost got it.
Almost got it.
Even the pizza, but
dang, Michael Jordan.
He's a nasty guy.
Yeah, even sick, he could make the winning shots.
I didn't know he was that nasty right before I watched the Last Dance documentary.
Mm.
I knew he was a great player, but that was the last year when he was playing. When I was exposed to the NBA, all I remember about the NBA was the Utah Jazz, maybe New York Knicks, 1999.
Yeah.
Then Lakers, of course, with the Shaquille and Kobe, right? But Jordan was nasty.
Yeah,
he was like one of a kind. He's the GOAT.
Yeah.
If you don't shake his hand, he's gonna destroy you in a match. What kind of level of competition this is?
Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah, so what about martial arts? So from the psychology standpoint, do those athletes consider this just as a sport, or maybe there is some kind of a part of them that they just like to hurt people?
I haven't, to be honest, I haven't worked with a lot of martial artists. I worked with one Taekwondo athlete. I don't know if that... that's within certainly the martial arts. And she was trying to move up levels, and so I worked with her on passing and moving up the levels. But again, I haven't worked with enough martial artists to really make a kind of blanket judgment statement on, do they just see it as sport, or is there more than that to it? So it's hard for me to say, just because I haven't. That's not really a clientele that I've worked a lot with.
So, Jake, I'm a fan of MMA, of UFC, I want to say, for 15 years now. And every time I watch UFC, there are some commentators that say, once in a while, they say, the strongest mentally people or strongest mentally athletes in the world, or just regular people who do sports, are the ones that do wrestling. Not the WWE stuff, but true wrestling.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea why? And kind of, I want to say, 9 out of 10 would say that's true. Wrestling is mentally very tough, and it makes you very tough mentally as well.
Yeah, I would assume that's probably the reason is, again, I haven't worked with a lot of wrestlers, but it certainly is very physically demanding and mentally demanding. So I think you really get both components to that, and I think also the discipline. You're having to be in a certain weight class and maintain weight and make weight and all that. That adds another element to it. It's not just being fit, but I know certain wrestlers that have gone to extreme measures to make weight, so I think that just adds another element to it of maybe not always the healthiest, but certainly a level of toughness that you get from putting your body and mind through that.
So psychology is all about the brain, right? So are there any uh, studies that say if you do sports from your childhood, maybe when you start when you're 20 or 30, right? And you do that for 30, 40, 50 years. And once you reach 70 to 80 years old, do you have any chances or less chances of getting some brain problems, for instance, dementia, Alzheimer's?
Well, certainly there's a connection in contact sports, football, American football, hockey, any sport where there's a lot of head injuries. There is definitely studies that show, these former NFL players have the brain of they're 40 and they have the brain of an 80-year-old. And so I think we've seen quite a few changes in the last 10 years in terms of not putting somebody back in a game if they've had 6 concussions in a row and improving the equipment. I still think there's a long way to go with that. But, I get asked the question all the time. I don't have kids personally, but if I did have kids, would I let them play like, American football some of the stuff I've seen, it'd be hard in some ways for me to put my kid in that because there's still such a culture of fight through the pain. I had one parent, this was when I was back in grad school in Tennessee, that his son had 8 concussions in like 2 years, and the high school football association in Tennessee would not let their son play. And so they wanted me to write a letter supporting that I thought he should play. And I just ethically did not feel like I could do that. And the last that I heard is they ended up moving to Georgia that had less restrictions that would so they actually moved out of state so their son could keep playing.
But concussion is like a knockout in boxing?
Yeah, so there's so much misunderstanding about concussions because you can't see it, but it's basically a bruise in the brain. And
so the concussion is after a hit, a smash, your brain touches the skull.
It doesn't just touch it; like it's almost like Jello.
Wobbles?
Our brain is the consistency of, do you know Jello?
Yeah.
So it's like sloshes around in there. So it's not just like one hit.
It's not supposed to do
moving all around, and the more you have it, the more long-term damage can be done. And it's hard because it's not an injury you can really see. So it's, somebody may look just fine, but, a lot of headaches are often dizziness, that type of thing. But even sometimes the symptoms don't seem that bad, but there's still that bruising and things that go on. But we've got to be careful not to put athletes back in until there's been certainly time to heal. But you get athletic trainers and coaches that don't see eye to eye on that. And, athletes get kind of thrown in the middle of that, which is a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, one of the most important jobs in martial arts, for instance, in the UFC, in the MMA, is a judge. He has to see whether you're not defending yourself and just not let your opponent to hit you one more time that you don't need that hit.
Yeah.
Because you're done, you're knocked out. So, and what about on the other side? So if you go in for sports for 20, 50 years, is it better for you not to get Alzheimer's just because you worked out, you were physically tough, physically fit?
Well, there's a lot of research that shows that exercise helps actually generate new brain cells, neurogenesis. So sport obviously helps a lot of people to stay active. It doesn't have to be a organized sport. It can be any type of physical activity, exercise.
Work out in the gym, right?
But it definitely can slow down the aging process cognitively, not just physically. Obviously, injuries can make you age faster too, but still, movement is very important for the body, but also for the mind. That's what we're learning more and more. It's not just for the body. It actually slows down the cognitive decline to keep ourselves moving, helps the brain regenerate.
It's like there's a saying that nowadays 80s, 60s is the new 80s, right? So 20 years we can live longer and be mentally fit.
Yeah.
For a few decades more.
Yeah. I mean, with my parents, I just stress to them, keep moving, keep moving. And I can see the difference. Like my mom has always been very active. She's a tennis player, and I see her aging much slower than my dad, who took 20 years where he didn't really do anything physical. And then he's in his 60s, he got back into it, but still like he's 75 and seems way older than my mom, who's 72. Only 3-year difference, but it's so important. To me, I have like the kind of two examples of somebody who stayed very active and fit versus someone who didn't, and I can see the difference in how they're aging.
If you would choose just for the brain health, mental health, reading or working out, what is better?
I think I would probably, if I had a choice, I would work out. I think both are necessary and very important, but I actually think if you're just looking for both physical and mental, staging off aging and things, I think honestly the working out would be more important, or staying fit and active.
So let's get into this one topic. So right now we live, I want to say, in a very strange world.
Yes.
Okay, so there's an athlete, Lia Thomas.
Yes.
So she's a transgender, and she competes in swimming with other women, with biological women.
Yeah.
Lia was born as a biological male. Now she is a female. So as a PhD, as a sports psychologist, what do you think are the most common problems with in those girls' heads? I mean, not Lia Thomas' head, but the competitors. When you work your ass off, you work out, you swim, you get prepared for swimming, for some competition for 10, 15, maybe 20 years, and then a biological ex-male comes and wins all the trophies.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm happy that I haven't had to deal with this at the university where I'm at, but it's going to happen at some point.
There's no data right now. No research.
Not a lot of research. And the reality, I was thinking about this question driving over. Athletes want to be on a level playing field as much as possible. Whether that's, I think the majority of athletes, it's never going to be completely level in terms of the playing field, because there's always going to be certain athletes using performance-enhancing drugs, and they get away with it. I mean, we see that in sport. There's always going to be certain athletes that have an advantage for whatever reason. But as much as we can, I think we want to feel like we're going out there and it's a relatively fair playing field. I know that's not the reality of all sports, but that's what we want. So I think when you see an athlete that was competing a year or two earlier as a male athlete and then is now on the women's team, that doesn't feel like a level playing field. So I understand that we want to give all athletes, including trans athletes, opportunities, and certainly trans rights have been attacked in our country. But I also feel like we need to make sure that athletes feel like they're still being treated fairly. And I think with Lia Thomas, it was just so close to her competing as a male to a female, a couple-year difference.
Yeah.
And she basically used that time of COVID when no athletes were competing to transition, that it just felt, it didn't feel fair. You have this athlete that was like, if you looked at the NCAAs as a male athlete, it was like ranked 400 in the whole country, and then wins a national championship as a female athlete. There wasn't enough, to me, time that went by. Now, I don't know where you put the time limit. That's not obviously something I have to decide, but I think it's very, very tricky when she basically went from competing as a male to competing as a female with very little time. And I don't care how much hormone therapy and things you do, she physically still... Bone structure and your muscle development doesn't just immediately go away. Yeah. Even if you're suppressing testosterone, there's still a certain level, and you went through puberty, you developed as a male. And even in her case, I'm not an expert on this, but I think she still had some of the male anatomy, and then so she's in the locker room.
Yeah.
And that also made, some of the female athletes feel incredibly uncomfortable. So it was an unfortunate situation. Again, I'm all for rights for trans individuals, but I also think we need to be understanding of again, I don't know I know the standards are changing and they're trying to figure out what to do. That somebody needs to not have gone through puberty or a certain level of maturation as a male. But the reality is a lot of trans are not transitioning until they're already gone through puberty. So it's tricky, but I think we need to understand that female athletes deserve to compete against female athletes that haven't been a decent level male athlete within a year or two. I just think about the female teams I work with. Even of myself, I was a decent collegiate male tennis player. If I transitioned, I could probably go and certainly be top of the lineup for our women's team right now. But that would not, even as a 40-year-old male, just because of, even there's just an advantage in height and strength.
I could only imagine what do those female athletes feel.
Yeah, and I work with a lot of female teams and athletes, and I can just imagine that would not only create a lot of resentment, but it would create a lot of anxiety, fear, misunderstanding. So I think I'm not anti-trans at all. I'm very much for human rights, but at the same time, I'm also for athletes' rights, and you deserve to play on a level playing field.
Can you imagine being a female and aspiring athlete, number one, number two, competition is in 2 weeks, then you find out there's the ex-guy, who identifies himself as a female, and you realize you're not the number one, number two. You're not competing.
Well, and that's why with Lia Thomas, the athletes that, I think it was Rowley Gaines, I think that was the name, finished, second, but she would have had a national championship if it wasn't for that. And I think Lia Thomas was trying to make the Olympic team for this year, but they put more restrictions in place, and I think there's a lawsuit going on right now. So it's going to be an ongoing. I mean, we're not seeing the end of this. This is going to be ongoing debate and discussion within sports, I think, for a while.
But swimming is not a contact sport. Can you imagine this in a martial art, boxing?
Yeah,
Ex-male comes into female boxing.
Yeah,
he can literally kill a person.
Yeah.
Kill.
And that's why I think you're absolutely right. It raises the issue even more in a sport like boxing, wrestling, other sports, martial arts. So I actually think it's probably good that we're having some of this discussion now with swimming, so that some more standards and
because you can't roll that. You can say that, for instance, you can do swimming, but you can't do boxing. You can do this, but...
Well, yeah, I don't think you can say... I think we actually have to have standards that are as fair across all sports as we possibly can, but knowing that we've got to protect these female athletes from competing against genetically male individuals.
Have you seen this short clip on a volleyball court? There was two teams were playing volleyball, of course, and one athlete was a transgender as well. So she jumps out the net, she smashes the ball, and the ball hits the head of the competitor. She's out.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. It's probably on YouTube. I could check it out.
She got knocked out because of the power this person has.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, relatively, if you look at sports over the last few decades, there's not that many examples, but there are enough that we need to make sure we're addressing this and taking care of. So
let's talk children. So, are there any studies, research? What is the best age for children to start doing sports? For their mental health, for their mental toughness. I'm seeing more and more research on not just starting sport, but how early to specialize in sport. And that's where I think, there's a difference between just exposing children to lots of different sports and getting, learning how to cooperate with others and learning basic skills versus, having a 5-year-old that's already training 6-7 hours a day in an academy with pressure and expectations that they already are going to, be a pro level athlete. That's bad.
It's hard to research. It's hard to quantify that through research, but certainly, sports sociologists that I've talked to, sports psychologists I've talked to, I think we have to be careful not to specialize so early. Yeah, there may be that one child that becomes number one in the world that was already training on a scholarship in an academy at age 5. But think about the hundreds of kids that are already burned out by the time they're 10 years old. So I think overall we need to. It's good for children to be exposed to a variety of sports, to participate, to learn skills that benefit them for life, to learn how to cooperate with other children, to have a coach they have to relate to. But I think we just need to make sure we're not putting too much pressure on kids from too young of an age to specialize, which we're seeing more and more of in all sports. Well, I shouldn't say all sports, but a lot of sports.
What about the CNS, central nervous system? So tell me whether that's true or no. So for instance, my kid is almost 5 years old. So is it true that if I get some kind of a physical pressure on him, run, go on a bike, shadow box, something like this, right? Throw a ball, kick a ball. So his central nervous system is going to fatigue right before he's going to fatigue physically, right? He's not gonna get fatigue physically before he says, no, I'm done. I'm not interested in this, and he will stop.
So you're saying that he would fatigue physically before...
Vice versa.
He fatigue mentally versus...
Yes.
I think generally that's the case, although children are so individual, too, in the sense of, some are just... And I think girls, especially who develop faster, they can sometimes mentally be out there 6-7 hours and not... necessarily say that they're tired or ready to. So I think we have to just be careful. I think to me, as long as it's still fun, that's great. When it stops being fun, and you can tell when you're a parent, you can tell when your child's not having fun.
Yeah,
to some degree.
Yeah, he says right away. I'm not in. He's like,
yeah, and I think that's the time to go. Okay, physically and mentally, let's switch what we're doing.
What about kids and overcoming? For instance, a kid goes to basketball class, right? He plays for the team. He's 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And after a few years of practices, he says, I'm done. I don't want to do that. How about the importance of saying, calm down, relax. Maybe you should skip a week or 2, but you have to go back because you're talented. Your coach says you have a talent. You have a future in the sport. Is it the case? Or if a kid says, for instance, for 2 weeks, he's been saying, I'm done. I don't want to do that. A parent should say, yeah, we should stop doing that.
I think taking a break is good. And I would avoid using language like, but you have to go back, because, again, a lot of times all they need is a little bit of a break, and then they're themselves ready to go back. But I think if you put that pressure of like, you have to go back. I'll just give one example. I worked with a volleyball player who was one of the top female volleyball players in the entire country. This was 10 years ago, so I can talk about this now. And I mean, she was already having Olympic coaches, interested in her, like as a future Olympian, and was the best, really one of the best in the country. And her dad hired me. He's like, we just want to have her mental training so she can even have that extra edge to get there. And I sat down with her the first session, and I was all excited to get to work with this high level junior athlete. I'm like, she'll be a future Olympian. That'll be so cool that I got to work with her. And she said to me, she's like, I hate volleyball and I never want to play again. And I was just like, oh, not what I was expecting. So, I said, okay, well, let's keep meeting. Let's, see if this is just a couple weeks phase that you're going through. And after working with her for 6 months, I realized she really hates the sport. But she was scared to death. She was scared to tell her dad that. He was this big, he was a strength and conditioning coach, big guy, intimidating, and she was scared to tell him that. So ultimately, I became the mediator. We sat down, the three of us, and I told him, we talked to him and told him that his daughter she was great at her sport, but she hated it and she didn't want to do it. And I thought the guy was going to kill me. I thought he was going to, he like jumps up. He's a 6'5", in my face. And I thought, okay, but ultimately that was the best, I think, choice for her. It was she really hated her sport, but she was so scared to let her father down. and the last I heard, she ended up choosing a different sport and was happy in that. Not necessarily like Olympic level, but so it's tricky. Like, again, as a sports psychologist, I just assumed everyone wants to be the best, and I've had to learn that sometimes helping an athlete step away from the sport is the best choice for them.
So she hated exactly volleyball, not the sports, not the physical stuff,
No,
not the activity.
she just hated. Again, I don't know. She just hated the pressure, or that was everyone expected her to be an Olympian, and she didn't want to. She had another sport that she actually ended up doing that she liked more, but she wasn't as good at it naturally, but it's complicated. I've even had university athletes that ultimately have stepped away from their sport, given up their scholarship because they were just miserable doing it. And that's a hard thing to do, because obviously coaches don't want me encouraging an athlete to leave, and I don't do that immediately. I always give some time, because I try to see what we can work on to get them in a better mental state. But
because these are kids, they had it one day, they love it the other day.
Yeah, so I don't think you want to just like give up right away. But if there's after 6 months of working with this volleyball player, it was really clear to me she was miserable.
But Jake, where's that line when you can say, I hate volleyball, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do boxing, basketball, soccer, and you can quit right here. I hate school, Dad, Mom, I hate school. And you can't quit school, right? You can't quit school. That's not good for you.
I've never been asked that in that way. That's an interesting...
because it seems like if you give up one thing, why don't give up another things? If you let your kid, your child, to quit on this, maybe quit on that as well.
Well, I would say with school, there's obviously legal. I think in the U.S. you have to be in school till you're 18,
or you can homeschool,
or you can homeschool. But there are definitely. I have a 12-year-old nephew who is very good at building things and very much an engineer type of mind. But school is incredibly hard for him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't. He's bored. He doesn't enjoy it. He doesn't particularly interact well with other kids. So it's this constant, like he actually purposely gets suspended so he can not go to school. And my sister has to take him to work, and he finds her work more interesting than being at school. So you go, okay, well, legally he has to be in school, or homeschooled. But he's got to have an education.
Yeah.
But that's not bringing out the best in him. So it's finding that balance of getting him doing other things, getting him things outside of school that are going to fulfill his need to build and be active. And so I think it's a trick. I mean, I think, again, legally school can be enforced, but that doesn't mean that a traditional school classroom is the best for everyone, just like a certain sport's not going to be the best for. So as much as they are different, I think there are still finding what's going to give your child the best future possible in terms of whether that's a sports career or a career in another area. I don't know if that answers at all what you were getting at, but...
Speaking of children and mental toughness, is there any research and any studies on whether children are more mentally stable, tough, and fit when they have brothers and sisters, or when they are the only child in the family?
Yeah, it's an interesting. We see a lot of times where like younger siblings end up being better athletes than their older siblings. They learn from them. You look at like in tennis of Venus and Serena Williams. Serena was the younger sister and became, even Osaka has an older sister. Naomi Osaka has an older sister that was a very good tennis player, but didn't get to the level that. So I don't have specific studies I can point to, but definitely it's very interesting to look at like only children versus multiple children. There's certainly, I think, some research being done on that right now. Is where in the family line do the most successful athletes? And I think a lot of times it just comes down to they learn from the mistakes of their older brothers and sisters. They also have like a built-in somebody to train with that can help.
The competition is always at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wrestling, fighting,
Exactly.
doing
Yeah.
basketball, doing shots.
So, but in terms of, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how to set up a research study to look at that. I'm sure sports sociologists are doing that to some degree, maybe some sports psychologists.
You as a sports psychologist, what do you think of participation trophies?
Well, I think our country way overdoes it. You know, I went to a rodeo last summer. Do you know rodeo?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
They were giving like the kids, they did some youth rodeo events like half roping and riding like sheep and, and it was fun, but they gave like the kids these like 6-foot trophies. And I'm like, okay, some of the kids like were horrible. They don't need a 6-foot trophy. Yes, I think at the youngest levels and the beginning levels, it's reward them for participation, reward them for effort. But I think we also way overdo it I don't know in like your country, but in the US, we certainly, you still should have to earn a trophy or a ribbon or whatever it is.
That's definitely a road to a snowflake generation, if you can say so, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You just participated, you just showed up, here's the trophy, here's the medal.
Yeah.
What for?
Yeah, that's how I feel, and I don't know what.
But you see, the problem is that in real life, you won't get a job just because you ended up in a job interview.
Yeah,
you won't get a pretty woman, a good wife, just because you texted her.
Yeah.
There's a competition. You gotta win the competition. You gotta be the best man for that woman.
Or as a student, you're not going to get a good grade just by showing up and participating. Yeah. You still have to perform. So I do think it actually does a disservice long term if we're rewarding only participation, because that's just not the reality of life.
Of life
at all.
That's not evolution at all.
No.
You gotta be the strongest, the fittest, the smartest, the most adaptable. That's the one who wins.
Yeah.
These people win Olympics. They win other competition. They win in life. They win in business, in academia, everywhere else.
I do a little bit of acting, and one of the roles I booked, it was a commercial for AT&T. There were 3,000 actors that were submitted for that project, and only one booked it. Okay.
That's not fair.
It's not a matter of participation. Oh, I showed up at the audition and participated. The ultimate prize was booking the role, and only one person gets it. Now, some of it's out of my control. They could have decided they wanted an Asian guy instead. Or, there's things out of my control, but it's not just a matter of
showing up,
participating and showing up. Yeah. It's a matter of doing the best job I can do in that moment. And that still doesn't guarantee anything. But so I definitely think we do a disservice if we're only rewarding participation, especially as you move on from, move up in anything, whether it's sports, school, jobs, life. Yeah,
because there's a distinction between this kind of stuff and once you graduate school, once you leave your parents' house and you're exposed to the real life and like, what is that?
Yeah.
Where's my food on the table? I gotta earn money. Wow, how do I get the job? How do I get this girl? How do I get this and that? Friends, everything else.
Yeah.
If I get in a street fight, I'm not gonna win just because I'm fighting. I'm gonna win because I have to be the best fighter on the street if there is a fight.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, you're from Eastern Europe and former, USSR kind of country. To me, it seems like there's less of that.
Yes.
I mean, I know, like, just again, I
We're
go
more
back
old school.
I go back to my sport of tennis, but the number of quality tennis players coming out of Russia, especially in the women's game, is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Both at the professional and even the collegiate level. I mean, we have so many Russians that want to get recruited to U.S. universities, and they're good, but then there's so many that are at the pro level. It seems like every other name is.
And males as well. I want to say top 20. There are,
I
want to say 5 to 6 Ukrainian, Kazakhstanis, Russians.
Exactly. And so to me, there is something different
in the mentality.
In that mentality. It can't just be you participate and that's it. There's a real fight and whether it's to get out of some of those situations and country. Again, I don't know, but there is definitely a different mentality.
But tennis has become all the way European sport.
It's dominated by European.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Landslide.
Yeah.
Once the Williams sisters went away, that's it.
Yeah.
Czechs, Polish, you name it.
Yeah,
Russians,
absolutely.
Ukrainians, all that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about tennis. So you're a big fan of tennis, right?
Huge fan, yes.
And you've participated in 2 movies that are related to tennis, right?
Yes.
So King Richard with Will Smith.
Yeah, that was a great experience. I actually booked the role as a tennis coach in it, and then COVID hit, and so the production shut down, and they actually dropped a lot of the smaller roles in the film. So my role got cut. And then when they started shooting again, they brought me back for another role that was a little bit smaller, less. I still shot it. It was a great experience. I got to shoot with Will Smith. He was in the room, and but then the final edit, that scene didn't make it in. So I was in the movie.
You're in the titles.
I'm in the credits, but my scene, it was rough because I went to Warner Brothers Studios for the premiere and didn't know if I was going to be in it or not, and quickly realized. Because I knew where my scene would have fit in. I was like, dang, it didn't make the final edit.
What was the scene? You were in a store?
I'm basically working in a tennis club. And Richard Williams, played by Will Smith, calls me up and is like, what kind of opportunities could you give my daughters? Like, they're going to be number 1 and 2 in the world. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, everybody says that their daughters are going to be the best. And I'm basically like, well, you can come by and if you want to talk to our other tennis pros, and then I hang the phone down. And I'm just like, who's this Richard Williams? So small scene, but and obviously in editing they just decided they didn't need that. But that's the reality that actors face, especially if you're not one of the main lead roles. Your scenes may or may not make the film, but still, it was a great experience. Definitely being a tennis player helped me book that. And then I booked a film, a small role as a tennis player in Challengers, which is the new film with Zendaya. It's coming out in April. I don't know the exact date. Again, don't know if my scene made the edits, but it was really cool. They flew me to Boston for about a week. I got to stay in the hotel with all of the director and other Zendaya and big actors. So it was a great experience. So we'll see if my.
It seems to be like a great movie. It's rated R.
Yes,
that's only for mature.
Yes,
some violence, some sex scenes, something like
locker room scenes, stuff like that. So,
what do you like about tennis? The competition.
You know what, I love the individual nature of it. That's what drew me to it from a young age. It's just you and one other person out there, and I like the fact that traditionally there was no coaching allowed, so you just had to figure stuff out on your own. I liked that. Like, some people hate that. They want a coach telling them what to do and how to, and I liked the problem solving. Like, every opponent's different, and how can I beat them and figure out ways to win? So actually in college, where coaching was allowed, was really hard for me. Like, I sometimes wanted to be like, just leave me alone. Just let me figure it out. Like, that's what I'm good at. And actually having like other voice in my head was not useful. Now, obviously that's something now, even at the pro, they're allowing more coaching and stuff, which I have mixed feelings about. But for me, it was like, I loved that it was just me and I could figure things out. And then my mom, I think my mom is a good player, and she got me started really young. And that just was something super fun that I got to do with her, and that we still play together whenever I see her. And we actually play mother-son tournaments together.
Really?
The national tournaments. So.
But it's mentally tough game.
It's very mentally tough, yeah, because it is just you. There's no subbing out. There's no...
And it's an inch game. It's just an inch game.
Yeah, and you call your own lines, so there's a lot of cheating. Not at the pro level. They have now electronic line calls, but yeah, I mean, your opponent, if I hit a ball and it hits the line, they can call it out and it's their point, and there's nothing, you really can't do anything about it. So it's a challenging sport.
You can say so just by watching Peter Sampra's highlights, right?
Yeah.
He was smashing this racket every other time.
I smashed the racket one time, but other than that, I I didn't.
But that's kind of the only sport where you can see that kind of anger, if I want to say. You won't see that at soccer when they just kick the ball to the audience. Basketball, no.
Yeah.
But in tennis, you see that pretty often when they just
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know if you've seen Breakpoint. It's a Netflix documentary. They followed like certain tennis players around, and you really see some of the emotions.
There's this new guy, Australian, Nick
Kyrgios. Yeah,
man,
he's crazy.
He's
Wild
crazy.
guy.
He's wild.
Yeah, he is.
He's a persona.
He is. Brilliant tennis mind, though.
Yes.
He's doing commentary now because he's injured, and he actually has a very high level of tennis IQ.
But he's the rackets.
Just crazy.
He talks shit.
Oh yeah,
just like you did in the movie Challengers. You were a shit talking.
I was,
right?
Yeah. Yep, Finn Larson was my character. I was a Swedish or Scandinavia, so I'm like doing it with the Scandinavian accent, and it was fun.
When you started playing tennis, who was the number one? Agassi?
Agassi and Sampras were like the two going back and forth. So that's who I always liked Agassi way better than Sampras.
Why?
I think because he was just kind of his own unique personality. You know, he was very not cookie cutter at all. Tennis is such a traditional sport that I just found his personality really interesting. I even played with his racket like my whole junior career. Everyone's always like, don't you, because Sampras was much more like in control of his emotions, was much more like traditional kind of country club kind of behavior. And even though I probably was more like Sampras in my behavior, I related to Agassi. I liked his persona. And
oh, so that was not Sampras who was hitting the rackets.
He may have, but overall he was pretty calm. Agassi was much more crazy. And
there was this Russian guy.
Kafelnikov?
Yeah, no, the other one. So he was smashing the ball with the long hair.
Well, Agassi had long hair.
Maybe.
Agassi's dad is Iranian. He played for the U.S., but trying to think, yeah.
Men or women tennis?
You know what?
There are two camps. I'm all for women.
They are, and I actually enjoy watching both for different reasons. But like I was a huge Monica Seles fan growing up. She's left-handed. I'm left-handed. I related to her that way. She was the player that I don't know if you remember was stabbed in the back.
No.
1993. She was number 1 in the world and a fan of the number 2 player, Steffi Graf.
No way.
Jumped over the railing and stabbed her in the back, and she missed 2 years. And she came back, but was never the same level that she had been. Like she had won 8 majors before the age of 19. By the age of 19, she had already won 8 majors. I mean, she was phenomenal.
Majors, you mean Grand Slams?
Grand Slams, yeah. She was probably going to go down as the greatest player of all time, and just never mentally. I mean, I can't imagine coming back. The physical injury.
The guy was caught?
He was caught and given like 6 months of probation was all. And this 9-inch knife went in her back, missed her spine by like a centimeter.
9 inch?
It was a boning knife, like to cut meat with bones.
6 months.
6 months. German court systems kind of. I don't.
So only 1 inch determined whether he's gonna get the life sentence or 6 months.
Yeah, they determined that
that's all you need.
They determined that he wasn't trying to kill her.
Oh, really?
That he was just trying to hurt her and keep her.
Kind of knife.
Yeah. Anyway, but she came back to tennis in '95, and that's when I was really getting into it, and I just was so I watched a lot of women's tennis because I was a huge fan of hers. That's one thing I like about tennis is like in the big tournaments, the men and women compete together, so it's a great showcase for both.
You know what I like about tennis is I was kind of a fan 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah,
but I like tennis because of the seeds. If you're number 1, you're gonna meet the number 2 or number 3 only in the finals or semifinals.
Absolutely.
That is amazing system.
Yeah.
There's almost no chance if you're number 300 because you're gonna get in the first round with number 1.
Yeah.
But you just don't go to the Grand Slams. You go to the smaller tournaments.
Yeah, but then it gets exciting because somebody like Osaka, who's been number 1, she's not seeded. So I guarantee you, every player is when she's in the draw now is like, please don't make me play her because even though she's fallen in the ranking, she still has that potential. Like you don't want to play her in the first round.
Yeah,
and as as she starts playing more again, I think she will get her ranking up. I'm pretty sure because she's phenomenal talent. But I guarantee you, players are just like, please don't make me play her in the first round. Please don't make me play her.
I believe the same was with all the opponents of Serena and
Venus.
Yeah. They were huge, muscular, man. And there we see Maria Sharapova, which is a small girl. No, okay, she's
she's tall, but
she's small. And the Serena, man.
Yeah.
The legs, the pecs, the
shoulders. Yeah.
She was muscular, man.
Yeah. No, I remember I saw Serena play in person at the French Open in 2003, I think. And seeing her like in person, just right close down by the court. I mean, I was just blown away by the power of
she
her
would
game.
Smash both of us.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yes.
With one.
Yeah. So I have huge respect. I mean, the level of you watch mixed doubles, and these women handle the power of the men great. I mean, they're great athletes.
If we take all the tennis players, males, in their primes, who would you say would be the number one? Federer?
Well, I'm biased because I'm a huge Federer fan. I think it partly depends on surface. That's the thing about tennis is the surface.
Either it's clay or hard.
Rafael Nadal, if it were clay court, I'd absolutely choose him. Hard court, I'd choose Novak Djokovic. Grass court, I'd choose Roger Federer. Certainly, there's that whole GOAT debate right now and I think you can't only look at number of Grand Slams.
Which is Djokovic, right?
Djokovic has 24, which is the most.
And Nadal is over?
Nadal's 22. Federer's 20. Yeah, I think 20. So they're close, but there's so many other factors.
But Federer is retired?
Yeah, he's retired. Nadal's trying to play this year. We'll see how that comeback goes, but yeah, it's fun. And then this whole new generation of guys coming up is exciting.
But right now we don't have any personalities except maybe in male sports. So we still have Novak. We've got this Nick
Kyrgios. Yeah,
this guy is a personality. All others, I don't want to neglect their talent and etc. But they're not the guys that a lot of people would watch and listen to their interviews only.
Yeah.
But Nadal was a personality, right? He was harsh. He was tough.
Yeah. He was like a rock star already there's a big tournament out in Indian Wells, California. And I remember he was like 17 years old and he was already had like hundreds of people following him after practice, wanting autographs. He just had that kind of.
And he's physically, man.
Even as a kid, was.
He's a big guy.
He's a big guy, yeah.
So in women's sports right now is the same. So no Sharapova, no Williams.
Yeah. But, what's interesting is like the Australian Open that just finished, they set an attendance record of over 1 million people. So the sport, even with these personalities leaving the game, there's still a lot of fans coming. It's interesting. I mean, it's not like the popularity's taken a huge hit. Maybe that's just because tennis has become so worldwide that you've got a lot of international.
So tennis is an expensive sport?
Yes. I mean, I do think more and more opportunities are out there now for kids to get into it that are like free lessons, free rackets, but it's a very expensive sport traditionally. Just, lessons
because
cost.
Of the equipment?
Equipment, lessons cost hundreds of dollars. So if you really get serious about your training, you're breaking strings in your rackets every week. So you're having to restring your racket. You've got to get new rackets every couple of months or years, depending how much you're playing. Entry fees for tournaments, court time. I mean, in Utah, where I grew up, indoor court time's $30 an hour. So you're training multiple hours. That's
Utah.
Starts adding up, and that's Utah. California, we're lucky because we can be outdoors most of the time, but it's just it's an expensive sport.
And once you make it, you're number one. You have 8 Grand Slams, and then
you have plenty of money.
Freaking idiot stabs you.
Yeah, it was a.
He should have 20 years in prison.
Sure. And I think that was part of the psychological damage too to Celis, who was like.
It's almost you can't.
There was no closure to it. This guy's still out there, free. So,
let's talk acting. So,
yes,
PhD. Then you're a model. You act. You sing.
Singing is not. I took voice lessons for one role that I had because I was trying to play a country singer, but I don't consider myself a singer. But musician, I'm a good pianist, good organist.
So why do you do acting? It's definitely not for the money, right?
No.
I do it. A passion of yours?
It is a passion of mine.
From the childhood you were watching movies?
No, it's something that I enjoyed when I was younger, but I didn't do very much with it. Just, some plays and a little bit. When I graduated from college, one of my mentors was a professor. He took me out to lunch and he said, "You don't need to answer this, but what do you want to be? Like become or be?" And actor came into my mind and I was like, okay, that's like, why?
Stupid.
And I didn't want to I didn't say it out loud, but it was always there. Like, I want to be an actor. But I was always like, I can't tell my parents that I want to just go be an actor. And I also, I had other things that I'm interested in. I mean, I'm passionate about sports psychology. PhD took a lot of time and training, but still there was that thought in my mind, like, actor, I want to be an actor. And so when I finally moved to LA, I was like, if I'm ever going to do this, I need to actually pursue this. And I think it was easier for me because I already had a career, so I didn't financially have to worry about acting. Wasn't paying my rent every month, and I think I could finally tell my parents, especially my dad, I want to try acting, but I already had a PhD, I already had a career, so it wasn't like I'm just throwing everything out and becoming an actor, which maybe hasn't. Some people may think, well, that's caused me not to be as driven to be an actor because I'm doing other things. But ultimately, I think it actually has made it a lot more fun because I'm not stressed about I have to book this role.
From an interview of yours, we have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours together over the past 3 years with your partner, both creating content as well as learning more about the business side of the entertainment world. What is the people really have no idea that was fascinating to you to know about the entertainment world? What kind of a shock to you?
Earlier today, I mentioned that for that commercial I booked, there were 3,000 actors just submitted for that one project. I knew it was competitive. I don't think I realized how competitive it was. And I quickly learned moving to LA that if I didn't get training, if I didn't get a good acting coach, if I didn't surround myself with people that I trusted, that I would get crushed pretty fast. And so, I mean, it didn't take me very long to go, okay, I can't just say I'm an actor. I actually have to I have to get experience. I have to be prepared. I have to know what I'm doing. And I think that's why so many actors come to LA and don't last very long, because maybe they did some in their small town in middle America, but LA is,
and they were superstars,
it's going to chew you up and spit you out pretty fast if you don't find a network of people, if you don't get people that you are learning from that you can trust. And again, I was lucky in the sense that financially I wasn't relying on it to stay in LA, because I don't consistently make enough money, even now as I've booked more stuff, to have it support me. So most actors that I know have other jobs. But then it's finding a job that still allows you to take off if you're on set or to audition
But that's a tough reality.
It's a very tough reality. Actually, COVID, a lot more of the auditions now are self-tape, where you just do it from your home. And for somebody like me that's also, working a full-time job and things, that's made it a lot easier to do. Because before I'd teach a class and then I'd drive an hour to an audition, race back for my next, I was lucky in the sense that I wasn't an 8 to 5 type job, but still it was just constant, just
time and effort demanding.
Time and effort. And that's less now. And I'm also more established in my teaching and sports psych career. So I'm a little bit more, it's easier for me to if I need to throw a class online, I'll just do that I have a certain,
that's cool.
prestige and reputation, and the university trusts me. I don't have to feel like I need to justify everything as much. So that's nice to be at.
How many years ago did you move to LA?
I moved in 2014, so 9 years.
Almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years,
So-
yeah, 9.5.
I'm new not only in LA, in California, but new in the US.
Yeah.
So obviously I have no network. How did you network when you just moved here from Utah to here? No, not from Utah, but from
Tennessee to here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Just go
I
to the
mean,
events. What did you do?
again, I put myself. I networked in different ways. So tennis always gives me
An edge.
an edge because I can always like network through tennis, and I find people to play tennis with, and that already gives me like a built-in friends and also people that I meet. Acting did that. I did have an agent in Miami and Atlanta that got me connected to some agencies here, so that helped. I was very lucky to get connected to an acting coach that I still work with, that is being a huge mentor to me. And then you're in class, so you meet other actors. I had my job at the university, which gave me a community as well, not related to acting, but just people that I could.
So basically you go out, don't stay home, and try not to be an asshole.
Yeah, that's good way to put it.
Okay, so what are your acting aspirations? What do you want to do ultimately?
I love TV. I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to do more film, but I'd love to be a series regular on a network TV show. That being said, there's so many networks now. There's so many streaming platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the next kind of goal is either like a recurring guest star that's 6 or 7 episodes, or obviously a series regular. I think I would really like that community family that can develop on set of a TV show. Movies have you shoot for 30 days and then you're done. Mm-hmm. Whereas a TV show, hopefully, if it's more than one season, you can kind of develop relationships. And I like that. I mean, I haven't had it, but I think I would like that.
What kind of role are you pursuing?
I think we talk, obviously in acting class, we're working on all different roles. As a professor, as a teacher, I think that would be a real comfort zone for me to play something like that. I still think we need some more roles for sports psychologists. That would be I'd love to play a role as at least related to what I do. That would be very easy to kind of hop into that. I'm actually writing a movie right now based on my experience as a professor with a student that was a stalker that I had, and it was like a legit,
he or she?
She
stalked you.
She stalked me, and it was pretty crazy. She followed me home after class.
For how long?
It went on for about 6 months.
Wow.
And the university did nothing. Like, I reported it, and they're like, well, I think because I was male and she was female, they're like, oh, well,
she's just in love with you.
She's in love with you. Just take care of yourself. And it's like,
imagine the vice versa. You're a female, and
if it were a female professor and a male graduate student, I guarantee you they would have jumped on it.
Of course.
But for months, they're just like, well, and it got to the point where one day she cut her hands with a knife and put her bloody handprints on my door and wrote, no, at my office, and wrote, I want to be with you forever, sealed with her blood. And I knew she was out there, so I stayed in my office for 2 or 3 hours because I was scared to go out. And then I saw that, and I went immediately to the LAPD and got a restraining order against her.
And she was like 18, 19?
She was a graduate student. She was a little older, like 20, 25.
And you were 30 plus?
34 or 5, 35 probably.
Did you talk to her?
Did I talk to her? Well,
Yeah.
she was in my class. So I saw
Did you talk to her about the situation?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And she was saying, I'm in love with you?
She's like, I'm going to have your children.
Oh, man! That's
she
great,
actually
definitely.
went to the registrar's office at the university and changed her name to my last name.
That's the true story.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm not making any of
man.
this up. There's so much more.
It seems fun, but it's not.
No, at first I could kind of laugh about it, like, why is this happening to me? But then it got so like serious. I mean, it got to the, like she's crazy about this. So I had another student that was a former Marine, ex-Marine.
She was in love with you as well?
No. He became my bodyguard. Like I unofficially made him my bodyguard. So he would like walk me to my car after class. So like she couldn't like grab me. And she sent him a death threat. Like if you keep trying to protect Professor Jensen, I'm going to kill you. So I have like all this material. So I'm writing this movie right now. So that would be a fun role. I mean, I obviously am writing it for myself to play.
What kind of a genre?
I guess
because you can turn it to
suspense.
comedy.
It'd be like a Lifetime type. It could be a comedy. I want there to be comedic elements to it, but I guess a suspense thriller type. I don't know.
But it's good. It has a happy ending, right?
I haven't. I mean, it's based off of my experience. I haven't decided with the movie.
No, in real life.
In real life, yeah, I guess it's a happy ending. She got a restraining order and had to stay away from me and hasn't bothered me since then. But
but she could definitely stab you or stab herself.
Absolutely, you just never know.
To both of you, yeah.
Yeah, but she was more interested in having my babies, but. So I've had interesting experiences like that. So I have so much content of my own life that I like to tell through story as well. But so going back to roles that I love. I was raised in rural Utah with a ranch and horses and stuff. So I'd love to, like, a Western role would be really fun to play, just because that's what I also grew up in. I always go out for surfer type of guy's role. That's my look.
You're not from Cali.
Yeah.
How's that?
I don't know. I have that look. Now I'm getting older. I've got to like transition to more not young roles anymore, which is fine. It's just it's like a shift in my mind.
You can be a surf coach.
I could be a surf coach or
ex-surfer.
Yeah, ex-surfer, that kind of stuff. So it's fun. That's the nice thing is there's acting roles for every age.
Yeah.
It's just kind of shifting my. When I was early 30s, I could still I looked young too. I could pass still for like 20s, but I can't do that anymore. So now I have to shift my thoughts of what roles to go out for.
Something old school, Burt Reynolds stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So, Jake, I always have the same question at the end of my podcast. So let's have two assumptions with you, okay? So assumption number one is the President of the United States is the most powerful human being on planet Earth. The assumption number two is you become one. Once you become the President of the US, Secret Service comes at you and says, hello, Mr. President, congratulations, we love you, we're on your side. And we as a Secret Service have all the answers in the world. You can ask us whatever you want, we will give you the true answer. What would be your first question?
That's really interesting.
You can take your time. I can edit it.
I gotta think about it for a minute. My first instinct, I hate how divisive our country is right now. Like, I've never seen it this divided politically. Like, in the past, I felt like you could have political differences and still be friends with people. And now it's like so extreme. And maybe I just, you're obviously coming from a different country and different political situation, don't feel that the same way that, I don't know. I mean, we're just so divided. So, and it bothers me because I've lost friends, like, and family members that don't talk over politics, which never was the case before. So I think I would want to ask the Secret Service what they feel like could reunite people in our country. And ultimately the US is such a world that I think that would also have implications for the world. So, how can we as a Secret Service and country become more united that will hopefully unite the world? Because it's not just in the US. We're seeing so much hate and
the hate is just because of one person. So this year, whether he gets elected or not, I believe that has to get to an end. Because if he gets elected, that's it. 4 years and you're done. Okay, we're cool. If he doesn't get elected, that's it. In 4 years, he's not gonna be a candidate. That's it. So this is the year when it's going to kind of an end.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a really interesting year politically. And I think the emotions and the hatred and the divisiveness is just going to get worse as we get closer to elections. And honestly, I'm not looking forward to it. But it's the reality of...
And the history shows us that the more stable the United States as a country is, the more stable the world is.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because if you have a general who is stable physically, mentally, then you're good. You know how to behave in front of this general. But if the general is not stable, he doesn't know what to do next. You can't say what is going through his head right now or in months or in 6 months, etc. Then you're like, maybe I should become a general. Maybe I should replace him. Maybe I should do this and that and that. That is not good. Jake, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the information. Thank you for the laughs. Tennis is a great sport.
It is a great sport. My students tell me that I talk way too much about tennis, so I'm like, but it's such a part of my life that it's hard not to.
It's a great sport.
It is a great sport.
Especially female tennis. I like it more. I hope I'm going to see you in the Challenger, the movie.
I do too.
I hope seeing you in a few years in some more A-list movies, Hollywood movies, blockbusters with greater roles.
I appreciate it.
With all those actors, the A-listers, Will Smith and others. And God bless you. God bless you and your family.
Same to you, and good luck with being in the U.S. and networking and connecting, and it's good to have you here.
Thank you.